Feeling something unusual in your eye is not normally an emergency situation, but what if that something is moving? Well, Oregon woman Abby Beckley was shocked after discovering what she believed to be a stray lash in her left eye was actually a parasitic worm. And the events that followed would leave doctors baffled. Beckley, 26, was most definitely the outdoors type. Her passion for pursuits including horseback riding and fishing complemented a can-do attitude and thirst for adventure. She'd also experienced living on a South Oregon cattle ranch and dreamed about working abroad. So when she was offered work as a deckhand on a fishing boat in southeast Alaska during the summer of 2016, Beckley found it impossible to refuse. However, during her second week in the new role, Beckley began to suffer discomfort in her left eye. The irritation caused her eyelid to droop and her eye to become red and tingly. Beckley assumed that a loose lash had become lodged in her eye but became increasingly concerned when she started having migraines. In an interview with National Geographic in February 2018, she explained, "It felt like when an eyelash is poking you." The symptoms persisted as she continued to work at sea. After 5 days of discomfort, though, Beckley had had enough. And as a result, she decided that she was going to remove whatever was causing her such distress. "So one morning, I woke up and I was like, if it's the last thing I do, I'm going to get whatever the heck is in my eye out of there," she recalled. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, the young woman began tugging at the skin below her eye. But what she found was alarming. "I pulled down the bottom of my eye and noticed that my skin looked weird there," she told CNN. Pinching the inflamed skin under her eyeball, Beckley used 2 fingers to prise out what was jammed underneath. To her horror, she removed a clear white worm, about half an inch in length and the same width as a strand of hair. It wriggled around for a few moments before dying on her index finger. "I was honestly in shock, in actual disbelief. I couldn't believe what I had just seen," she told People magazine in February 2018. Following her stomach-churning discovery, Beckley turned to a coworker for help. Failing to find any information online, the 2 friends assumed that the slimy critter was a salmon worm. But after a doctor in Craig, Alaska, reacted with shock when Beckley showed him 3 more worms that she'd taken from her eye, she was no longer sure. When she went home to Oregon, Beckley received further medical advice. Some of the doctors whom she consulted were initially skeptical of her story. But when they witnessed a worm crawling over Beckley's eyeball, they had no choice but to believe her. "I could feel them at that point. I felt one come to the surface of my eye, and I was like, oh my God. You need to look," Beckley told People. They looked, and they were just stunned. During the next 3 weeks, a total of 14 worms were pulled from the unlikely host's left eye. The usually active Beckley found the experience difficult and felt low emotionally during this time. She found herself wondering whether the worms would travel to her brain or even cause blindness or paralysis in her face. None of the doctors she saw could give her firm reassurances that everything would be okay. As a result, it was a trying time, and Beckley often stayed at home, preoccupied with the critters living in her head. "It was really hard for me to do anything, because I was distracted by the worms," she told People. "It was like living in a nightmare. It was like, when is this ever going to end?" Beckley was eventually diagnosed by scientists at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention with Eyelash gullosa, a species of eyeworm more commonly found in cattle in the north of the U.S. It was the first known case of a human having become infected with the rare parasite. The eyeworms are carried from host to host by flies that are attracted by the tears secreted from animals such as cows, horses and dogs. Doctors told Beckley that her eye would have become infected after one such fly had vomited in it. Moreover, these medical experts were left stunned by Beckley's experience. Dr. Aaron Bonura, assistant professor of infectious diseases at Oregon Health and Science University and part of the team that treated Beckley, told KOIN6, "We can get parasitic infection in the eye. But typically the patient eyelash worm to ever be found in a human eye." Thankfully, as soon as the final critter was removed from her eye, Beckley felt better. She made a rapid recovery and, apart from developing an understandable aversion to flies, has suffered no discernible long-term effects. One of the motivations for making her story public was to help anyone else who might go through the same ordeal in the future. After being left in the dark from day one of her experience, Beckley hoped to ensure that nobody else had to endure the uncertainty that she did. "Part of the reason I'm speaking out is that I had wished I could find one article or source that would reassure me this happened to someone else and they are fine," she told CNN. "If this does happen again, I'm hoping my story will be out there for the next person to find," Beckley added. And Dr. Bonura certainly remains proud of her former patient, telling National Geographic, She handled it all with remarkable grace and stride and is incredibly strong. Has some exposure to a developing country. Richard Bradbury of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention led a study on Beckley's case, and a report has since been published in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. Only after referring to a 1928 German research paper could he confirm the true identity of this particular species of eyeworm. The Eyelash gullosa is now documented as the third type of. If you enjoyed this story, then wait for our next story starting in 10 seconds. Whether you're overprotective or laid back, every mom has one thing in common: strength. You need it if you want to be a mom, because having a child comes with too many fears to count. There's the fear that your kid will be bullied, fear that your kid will get sick, the terrible list goes on. Of course, then there's the fear, the one some moms can barely bear thinking about at all. Kidnapping is truly every parent's nightmare. This was Mom Callie Ataya's biggest worry as well, one she saw come true before her very eyes. But instead of giving up, Callie did what most moms would do. She hopped on a plane and donned a clever disguise, determined to see her son again. Of all the places Callie Ataya thought she'd end up, the side of the road in the middle of Egypt wasn't on her list. Of course, meeting a man like Muhammad Ataya wasn't in the plan, either. The day they first met, everything changed. In 1999, Callie was on track to get her master's degree in education when she met Ataya, who was working in a restaurant in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. They got married a year later, but according to Callie, that's when their love story took a turn. 3 months after our boy was born, he left, Callie said of Ataya. Callie found herself suddenly alone with her newborn son, Nico. She was thrust into the role of a single mom, no matter how hard Callie fought for her marriage to survive. Then, the truth came out. Basically, he married me for a visa, Callie revealed. When their divorce was finally granted in 2005, Ataya moved to Egypt, though Callie tried to keep him in Nico's life. This ended up being a fateful mistake. You see, in July of 2011, Ataya told Callie that his mother was dying, and that her final wish was for Nico to see her. The problem? Ataya's mother lived all the way in Egypt. Still, Callie knew what she had to do. Callie and Nico flew all the way to Egypt with Callie's sister, Maria, in tow. When Ataya picked them up in a taxi, all three climbed in. But minutes later, as the family was traveling down a lonely dirt road, the cars suddenly started to sputter. Ataya complained of car trouble and pulled over. According to Callie, that's when everything changed. Ataya forced Callie and Maria out of the car, slammed the door, and immediately disappeared down the road, taking Nico with him. Callie described the moment in terrifying detail. Nico was pounding on the back window, asking, screaming for me and his aunt, Callie said. But all the two women could do was chase the taxi until it was gone, leaving only tire tracks in its wake. Abandoned in an unfamiliar country, Callie and Maria tried not to panic. Callie knew this wasn't a mistake. As much as she had once loved Muhammad as her husband, there was no denying that he played a much different role now, Nico's kidnapper. Callie immediately contacted the local authorities, but it wasn't long before they realized the police were no help. See, there was another element to Nico's kidnapping that was greatly complicating things. In 2011, Egypt was in the midst of a revolution. Callie had no doubt that this revolution would inhibit the police's search, and that it probably had something to do with why Ataya kidnapped Nico in the first place. Still, this information didn't get Callie any closer to locating her son, so she made some calls. When the local police couldn't help her, she contacted private detectives. But as the months passed and still Nico was nowhere to be found, even the most experienced and expensive detectives were forced to return to Callie empty-handed. Callie had nowhere else to turn, until she realized something. If detectives couldn't help her, then she'd just have to take matters into her own hands. Some people will say I was crazy, Callie said. I had already lost everything. I had nothing to lose. Some people would find it crazy that she made 4 trips to Egypt to search for Nico. But if you ask a mother, they probably wouldn't see it as crazy at all. A mother's love stretches far and wide, even all the way to Egypt. To me, it's like a living death, Callie described of life without Nico. You know, I'm walking, I'm breathing, but it's nothing. The emptiness. After 2 years of hoping, crying, and exhaustive searches, however, Callie discovered that hope wasn't lost after all. Despite the enormous financial toll, Callie decided to hire one last private investigator to help her navigate the unfamiliar Egyptian landscape. This, along with her own determination, finally gave Callie the lead she was searching for. She and the private investigator tracked Nico's whereabouts down to Alexandria, Egypt. Once they knew his general location, Callie knew how close she was to seeing her son again, so she couldn't help but throw caution to wind. While disguised as an Egyptian woman, Callie spent months following her ex-husband and son around Alexandria. She went back and forth between wearing a burqa and a niqab, each time just trying to shield her face from her ex while seeing if Nico was safe. Every time she saw Nico in person, it took everything she had to stick to her plan. "I came so close to my son, and I could not touch him," she later said. Callie knew patience was key. She had to wait for the right moment to act. And on March 14, 2013, Callie finally made her move. It must have been strange from Nico's perspective. As he walked into school, a woman shrouded in black grabbed his arm and said something he'd waited 2 years to hear. "Nico, it's mommy, come with me." But as strange as it must have been, Nico wasn't scared, not when he looked into the eyes of the woman who called herself his mother. He recognized them as his mother's eyes, which were characteristically blue. With that in mind, he didn't hesitate. Callie rushed them over to a waiting rickshaw. "Get in," she whispered, and Nico did just that. He was once again being shepherded away from a parent, but this time, he was on his way to safety. At least, that's what they hoped. As Callie held Nico close to her, she finally learned why her ex-husband had kidnapped her son. Nico told her that his father wanted to make him a Muslim because American society was rotting. Ataya, it turns out, was a dedicated member of the Muslim Brotherhood. The duo stayed at a safe house for 3 weeks before flying home, but just because they were out of arm's length from Ataya didn't mean they were safe. Even now, Callie and Nico keep their address a secret from anyone they don't trust. Still, Callie has reason for hope. Mohammed Ataya is wanted for kidnapping a U.S. citizen, aka Nico, and he's also wanted for forging documents that lied about Nico's Egyptian citizenship. Now that Nico is home safe, Callie just wants to regain a sense of normalcy. Nico knew that his mother would come for him, Maria told the press. Nico, of course, was right not to doubt his mother's dedication to finding him. A mother's love truly has no bounds, even when the mother herself is the victim of a terrible crime.